senior producer from NFL Films. Greg Cosell joining us, and Greg's appearance on the show is presented by Scott Lawnyard, an official commercial site work partner of the Buffalo Bills. And this one's a biggie for the Bills this week. As we know, not a lot of wiggle room for them at 6-5 on the season. Meanwhile, the Eagles riding high at 9-1, best record in the league. And the Bills have to play them on the road, where Buffalo has only one victory this season. Pretty crazy how lopsided it's been between road and home. Greg, hope you had a good turkey day. You might even still be burning off some of those calories you consumed yesterday. How much pie did we down yesterday, Greg? Because I held up my end of the bargain. Are you not a pie guy?
I do like pie, but, I was good yesterday. I did not overeat. I know most people do that on Thanksgiving. I didn't really overeat, so I felt pretty good about it.
All right, you're a better man than me.
Yeah, I'm a big overeater guy, and and also the obligatory nap on the couch, and I do the whole thing. I am stereotypical old man. I just eat and sleep. That's good.
Well, there you go. Yeah. No,
and then sneak ice cream the rest of the night.
Wow,
so, yeah,
you are bad.
Now there you go.
I am an absolutely.
Steve's got us all beat apparently.
I am absolutely an unapologetic old man.
Okay,
let's go.
Okay, Steve is a foodie. There's no doubt about it. Let's begin here, Greg. We see the Bills with a get-right performance. First game with Joe Brady, and probably the two biggest wrinkles that we pulled out of the game. More pre-snap motion than we have seen from the Bills all season. It was motion with a purpose. And then second, they used the backs in the passing game, and not just as a check-down option. There were designed routes for the backs in this game, something we also haven't seen a whole lot of previously. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, those two things stood out. If you had asked me the question, what did I see, I would have said those two things. I think the motion is important. And we'll see if they continue to do it. We have spoken numerous times about Cook and his ability as a receiver. Obviously, Ty Johnson. I remember doing Ty Johnson when he came out of Maryland. I think it has to be 4 or 5 years ago because he's been around the league. And I thought he was a pretty dynamic player. Obviously not a feature back, but a guy that could give an offense, some complementary work as both a runner and as a receiver. Obviously, when you hit an 81-yard touchdown, like we're looking at now, that changes things as well. But the other thing that I felt like I noticed, and again, it's just one game, and I'm not saying it never happened. Obviously, it did happen under Ken Dorsey, but I think I felt like I saw route concepts and combinations. And again, it's a division opponent, so they know them well. Route combinations that really presented primary read availability for Josh Allen. And I think that's one thing you're really trying to work toward more of. We get wrapped up in the fact that he is as special as they come when it comes to those out of structure, second reaction movement plays. And he may need some of those this week. Who knows? But, I think you really have to work toward your passing game being structured where he can drop back, hit that back foot, and deliver the football. I mean, a great example of that to me was the 27-yarder to Shakir, not the 81-yarder, which obviously was a big time throw, but the 27-yarder to Shakir, where they basically ran a high-low on both sides, and it really presented a clean throwing opportunity within timing and structure. And I think you really want to work toward that because you can't live on Josh. It's easy to say, well, we're always going to be competitive because we have Josh Allen. What does that mean? What is you going to expect him to just be Superman every week? Sometimes you have to just make plays within the structure and be in a system that's effective.
This changeover in offensive coordinators, you always get a little boost from it. And is there some tangible stuff? Because listen, and I was going to ask you this as well. The Bills do need to play more consistently offensively, particularly in the turnover margin. But also, this game this week, this may be as deep a roster as they've faced all year. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Oh, the Eagles are a really good team. Now, one area where the Eagles have struggled, and at times has been in their secondary. And now there have been games where that's been compensated and camouflaged by the fact that they have a great pass rush and a tremendous defensive line rotation, and that could be an issue in this game. Because Hassan Reddick, he comes from the left side. I would imagine he'll cause Spencer Brown problems at times. The question is, what does that mean for the Bills? Does that mean chips? Does that mean formation looks that try to eliminate that? But keep one thing in mind, as good as Reddick is, Josh Sweat from the other side actually has more quarterback pressures. Josh Sweat is their best overall defensive lineman. So, that's a potential issue as well. But in the secondary, last week, they made a change that probably was a very smart one, given that I watch the Eagles every week, because James Bradbury has not played particularly well this year. So last week, they made Darius Slay their boundary corner every snap, and they made Bradbury the field corner, whereas prior to that, they were playing sides, and Bradbury was getting burned a little too much. So they made that change because the boundary corner ends up playing more man-to-man coverage, even if it's a zone concept. So Slay became the boundary corner a week ago. I would assume they'd stay with that.
And we saw Byard and Roby get red zone takeaways last week against the Chiefs. And Byard was on Kelsey for a part of that game as well. Matchup-wise, would you anticipate he draws Kincaid as an assignment as well in this week's matchup?
Absolutely, because Byard's done that his whole career. When he was with Tennessee, when they played the Chiefs, he would always match up to Kelsey. He's a tight end matchup. That's what he's been his whole career. He will get Kincaid when they choose to play man. And the Eagles play a pretty good amount of man coverage. They're in the top 10 in the league in the amount of man coverage they play, so they will play man. So now the question becomes the route concepts to attack and defeat man, which I think they're going to need to do. I also, look, last week's game was such that they could stay with the run game because they got ahead. And the only way you lose, we're just being honest, the only way you lose to the Jets or allow them to stay in a game with Zach Wilson at quarterback is if you turn it over. So they were going to stay with the run game. This week will likely be different. The Eagles will score. So I'm very curious to see what Joe Brady does, from an offensive perspective, whether he thinks, okay, we have to put this game in Josh's hands, or whether if it's relatively close, if the Eagles don't run away with it, let's say, if he feels, hey, we can run the ball a bit and we can stay, balanced, whatever that means for each team, but somewhat balanced.
So you got this team with a Joe Brady offense, and that's the kind of the decision you got to make. How are you going to play it? You've got to kind of keep abreast of them. Jalen Hurts has got like 24 total touchdowns on the year. Josh has got 28. They're 1-2 in the league. You do expect this game. I mean, you're going to have to keep up on the scoreboard, right? It's not going to be like a 6-3 matchup, right? On this, these teams are going to be able to move it. And
just Steve, I think you guys would agree because of the Bills on defense with the injuries they've had. It's. You hope they play really well, but they're not likely to hold the Eagles totally down. The Eagles have great weapons on the perimeter in A.J. Brown, who's certainly a top 3, top 5 receiver in this league. Devonta Smith is really good. Obviously, Goddard's not going to play, so he's a top tight end. But, the Eagles have a lot of weapons. They have a really good offensive system. So, Hurts is an interesting guy because he's obviously very, very good. But they run a really good system as well that presents a lot of clean looks for him, and he executes at a high level, and he gives you second reaction ability. So in many ways it's tough in a number of areas when you play the Eagles because Hurts can make those special plays that Josh can, as we're seeing right here, but he also can run the system really effectively, and that's the way he's grown as a quarterback to the point where he's one of the higher level quarterbacks in the league.
Without Goddard last week, we saw the Eagles dip their toe into some 4 wide looks, going 10 personnel a little bit. Should we, especially knowing that the Bills secondary is going to be a little shorthanded because Taylor Rapp and Dane Jackson have already been ruled out of this game. Should we expect to see more 4 wide looks from the Eagles to try to spread that secondary thin?
Yeah, I would expect that, especially with the quality of their O-line. I think that they always feel like they can protect Brownie. They got arguably the best O-line in the league, and I don't think they view protection against any opponent as a problem. So I would think that you will see four wide. Julio Jones is there. He's not what he was, obviously, but he doesn't need to be. They're not going to play him 60 snaps in the game. So I think last week they played 11 snaps out of 10 personnel, one back, four wide. I would expect a number in that range. And it would not surprise me if Julio Jones gets a few more targets this week.
As you mentioned, they're so deep at their defensive line. They've got that huge rotation. They actually They released Derek Barnett today. I guess he was not playing very much. I mean, give us a
Not
little insight.
Maybe getting 12 snaps a game, maybe.
Right. Give us an insight as to their defensive line. What makes it? Who are the who plays with who? I mean, those guys are big, young, athletic. I mean, they got some horses over there.
They do. They play a ton, Steve, of 5-man fronts. Now they'll play 4-man fronts as well, obviously, but their foundation is the 5-man front. Sweat and Reddick are usually on the edge. Fletcher Cox and Milton Williams is a name. I know you guys are familiar with him because you're playing the Eagles this week, but he's had a phenomenal season. He is really good inside, kind of playing that 5 technique, that 4-eye. And then Jordan Davis is a load right in the middle. He's really good in the run game. Not a great pass rusher yet, but he is a big, big body with strength and power in the middle of that defense. And Fletcher Cox is still playing, at a pretty high level and playing a lot of snaps. I think most of us thought going into this season at his age, he would not be playing this number of snaps on a weekly basis, but he is, and he's played well. But Sweat is a big time all around D end. He's their best overall D lineman. But Reddick is he's an explosive edge rusher. And I think that's one matchup with Brown that it'll be interesting to see how the Bills deal with it. You can deal with it too by the nature of your passing game, but it will get to be 3rd and long. So then you'll find out how they really want to deal with it.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what the final Eagles injury report reveals, because Milton Williams has been in concussion protocol all week and he hasn't practiced. So
that's right. And he's played really well for them, Brown.
Yeah, no, I mean he definitely flashed last week against the Chiefs. I noticed him right away.
If he can't go, and by the way, obviously we're doing this on Friday, and if he can't go, and it sounds like he may not, it's rare that a guy goes the next week. I totally forgotten about that. Thank you for reminding me. It doesn't decimate them, but it'll be interesting to see because Josh Sweat can move inside as well. It might mean more snaps for the rookie Nolan Smith.
Right. Yeah. And I was wondering if Nolan Smith might play more just by virtue of the fact that Barnett's been released. I mean, I know that he usually backs up Reddick on the other side, but I'm kind of wondering now, does he rotate in more, to relieve those guys in their rotation?
And by the way, Sweat in their 5-man front has throughout these last couple of years played meaningful snaps inside. So you could certainly see that, and you could see Smith getting, maybe 20 snaps as playing on the edge. He's an explosive kid. He's not big, very thin-waisted, the kind of waist we'd all like to have right now. But that kid is an explosive athlete.
And I know that, Jalen hasn't taken off and run as much since the knee injury, although he's not shy about extending plays when necessary.
No.
So what has been the general defensive approach from opponents in terms of keeping him corralled, so to speak, and not ripping off 80 yards rushing in a game, for example?
It's been multiple. Some teams will spy. Other teams will sort of, have kind of a contained rush. He almost always leaves the pocket to his right. And you have to be aware of that. Now, obviously, if the middle opens wide up, he'll just go forward, but he tends to leave the pocket to his right. And don't forget, the design run is a factor. Last week in the second half, they called a bunch of design runs for him. And last year, that was a major part of their offense. And that really dictates how you have to line up and play defensively. And another factor, too, and we're looking at it right here, this brotherly shove, that's a big deal because the Eagles are in many ways a 4-down offense. So if they get to 4th and 2 yards or less, they're going for it. It's a given. They are going for it. So they are, and they'll go for it anywhere on the field. So it's not, oh, they're only going to go for it if they're across the 50-yard line. They're a 4-down offense, depending on what that 4th down call is. The yards to go, or the line to gain, I guess everybody says now. But so that's something to be aware of. Just you see how excited teams get when a team comes up short of a 1st down and it's 4th and 1. Not with the Eagles. You can't get excited. They're going to go for it, and you know what? They make them.
Right, and that's what are your thoughts about that? Because there's no question the simultaneous get off time they have with their interior offensive line. I mean, it's all it's like they're all the center. They all go on the centers. It's a great jump they get on the snap count. Yeah. The submarine aspect of it and the surge that they can get from it. Has anybody come up with any sort of plan, even if it hasn't worked, rather than just to push against it?
It's funny, Steve. I'm kind of a purist, and I know it's illegal in the rules, so therefore take advantage of it. But it's not my favorite play. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I get it.
I'm being kind. It's not my favorite play. So normally when I see it, I don't study it. I just watch it and then I move on to the next play. But there's no question, because it's legal and allowable. They're the best team in the league, far and away, executing that play, and it changes the whole approach to the game. I mean, I remember it wasn't this past week, but I think the week before they went for 4th and 1. I think they were on their own 28-yard line. That's unheard of, but they'll do that. It doesn't matter. That's just part of who they are, what they do, and they make it.
Yeah, that offensive line, though, they did have their share of problems with the Chiefs' front. Steve Spagnuolo kind of threw the kitchen sink at them. Hurts got taken down almost a half dozen times on sacks. He was pressured on a number of others. Not for nothing, but the Bills are coming in here with the 2nd most sacks in the league, behind only Baltimore. I mean, they have a formidable front that they can throw at this Eagles front. I mean, if they can get them in some, 3rd and medium, some 3rd and longs, that's when Buffalo's defense really shines. I realize that is easier said than done. It's a formidable offense that the Eagles can put on the field. I'm just kind of curious what you think of that matchup and what the Bills, at least their defensive front, can throw at this group.
Well, the Eagles' O-line has had 2 games this year in which they struggled. The Jets, where they were actually handled, and they lost to the Jets, and then this past week where they did struggle. You're right, Brownie. So this becomes the unit for the Bills that really has to perform at a high level. They've got to get around Hurts. I will tell you this about Jalen Hurts. He's a very good player. That's inarguable. But Jalen Hurts has a tendency to leave the pocket prematurely. He will drop his eyes and he will look to move. Now, he can make great plays when he does that. Just like Josh Allen can make great plays when he leaves the pocket. So, but you do want to get him in that mode. You want to get him moving, and then you have to account for the movement. Now, as I said, and believe me, they probably have 5 guys studying just Jalen Hurts on the Bills, scouts, staff, the whole deal. Me, I'm one guy, so I don't know every nook and cranny here, every nuanced detail, but he predominantly moves right. You've got to be prepared for that. He will break down in the pocket prematurely. He will look to run. So, you want to get him in that mode, but then you've got to handle it. So
yeah,
that's just the way it is.
Last thing I wanted to throw at you, knowing the secondary shorthanded for the Bills in terms of numbers, we've seen Rasul Douglas follow the number 1 receiver a little bit each of the last couple of weeks. He did it against Cortland Sutton on pass plays. He did it to a certain extent against Garrett Wilson last week. Right. Logic is telling me we should expect him to follow A.J. Brown around a little bit.
I guess that's possible. Those things are always hard to know, Brownie. But, he's their best corner, so it's possible. The Eagles do a really good job moving their receivers around. Brown is obviously a really good receiver, and so is Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith, he hasn't put up the numbers, and he doesn't have the volume share that Brown has this year, but he's a really good receiver as well. So, those 2 guys are tough to handle. I'm curious how Sean will want to handle that. He may decide that playing zone is the best way to go. We'll see, but it's very possible with Douglas. You know, Douglas I think he's a good corner. He's never been, in my view, a great man corner. I think he's a great keyer, cluer. You know, I think that's his strength. You know, I mean, the interception, and I know people say, well, it was Zach Wilson, but the interception he had last week where he fell off his guy and kind of, it was his own concept. Not this one. It was the other. Didn't he have two last week?
Yes,
He
he
did,
did.
and a
Yes, he
fumble
did.
recovery.
And a fumble recovery.
Yeah, the second one we're talking about, where I think he was outside, almost playing like a trap corner, and he fell inside. He's really good at that. Really good at that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
This
it
is
right
it.
here. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're right. Yeah, he
Yeah.
fell off and just read. Yeah, he reads the quarterback's eyes extremely well. He's got good size. There's no
Yeah.
question. A.J. Brown and their crew are really. I mean, they're the NFC champs for a reason, and it's not all because of the tush push.
Yeah.
No, they're a really good team. I mean, you know, you got to remember. I mean, you know, they've won what, like I mean, even if you count the Super Bowl, what have they won? Something like 27 of their last 30 or 28. I mean, I don't. The number's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Right.
And you know that happens for a reason.
Right.
Yeah, they are consistent. There's no doubt about that. And I was telling Steve, one of the bigger differences between Allen and Hurts is really good when that team is up by a score, getting that game into the garage and
Yep.
notching the victory. He is
Right.
really good at that.
And one final point, when they've needed a drive, okay, and this is cliched, but it's true. I mean, Steve knows this, you know, from playing. When they need a drive, a touchdown drive in the second half of games, they get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, they win games in the second half. I mean, they win.
Yeah.
All right, well,
Greg,
we're hoping
thanks.
for a close one and an entertaining one. Thanks, Greg.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.